dining tables. They've always been places of coming together, a space for sharing meals and stories. This table is no exception, and special because it's in the home of Cy and Ellie Schorr, the very place where NAMISA, the National Alliance on Mental Illness of Southern Arizona, was founded. Cy and Ellie, attorneys who met in New York, married and moved to Tucson, Arizona in 1954. They have 4 children, one of which has a serious mental illness. Struggling to find a group home that could take their daughter, they met with Dr. Jose Santiago, a well-known psychiatrist who was instrumental in bringing people in the mental health field together and who introduced the Schorrs to other families in the area with the same needs. It was around this table that these families came together on a regular basis to discuss how they could better advocate for the seriously mentally ill and their families.
This isn't even the whole size. It becomes 2 leaves bigger.
Yeah, it is.
So we have plenty of room.
Yeah, this is where
it's at.
And one of the big problems in that era, the stigmatism that came with mental illness. Folks didn't want to talk about it. They sort of hid in the shadows. So it was difficult to find others who would help.
I had thought of the fact that it would be good to get together with some other families and do something.
We worked together pretty darn much as a team, and it was an exciting time.
Nancy Mashland was one of the parents who met regularly at the Schorrs.
She was the brightest one in the family, most athletic, best looking, and yet her mental illness totally wiped that out. She was both bipolar and schizophrenic. And back in the 70s and 80s, federal would not talk to the mental health. And so she was bounced between something like 30 homes. One was for addiction, one was for mental health, one addiction, one. She'd gone through them all. And I have the greatest respect for Ellie and Cy Schorr. Particularly Ellie, as a lawyer, was able to move mountains legally.
We weren't getting much attention from those who were in a position to help. We realized we had to create a vehicle for advocacy. And Ellie began to put together, establish, and publish a newsletter.
It was a very difficult undertaking.
Ellie's newspaper became a vital source for families in need. She covered everything related to the developments in the mental health system, and it proved to be an especially powerful instrument that she placed into the hands of as many legislators and leaders as she could. The newsletter began receiving national recognition and awards from the National Alliance on Mental Illness.
And from that advocacy, Ellie decided to run for the legislature. In 1988, she sponsored some earmark legislation providing for an additional standard for commitment, which has been emulated throughout the country. Ellie was also very instrumental in helping to form the state chapter.
1983 was when we chose to become part of NAMI, the national. And we did it before Phoenix and before the state. And I drove up and down the highway more times than I'd like to count, and loved building NAMI, Arizona.
Most of the areas that were giving aid to people with a mental illness were seeking people who had milder forms of problems. So basically, they were not receiving the type of care or help they needed, or their families.
I call it the double bind, that those that had addiction, self-medication, and those with serious mental illness found in life that the government was not supporting them together.
A lot of the community began to understand that the organization was forming, was in existence, and family members who who were affected, who were not part of the organization, would call Ellie and start discussing their problems with her and where they might go for help or for getting other resources. So Ellie began to be, her phone started ringing a lot
all the time
to answer questions from these affected family members.
I think there was a special feeling in our group. Everybody had the same problem, basically.
Cy and Ellie continued their advocacy throughout their careers. Ellie was elected to the National Board and was later appointed by President Bill Clinton to serve on the Advisory Board for Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services. Nancy also continued advocacy and went on to write a book detailing her daughter's struggle with the dual diagnosis of mental illness and substance abuse, and how as a family they navigated the mental health system.
What I see is more openness, more willingness to be vulnerable, and that's the key.
Today, if a family gets impacted by serious mental illness, they are in a different position than we were 40 years ago. So much of this was done by family members and their friends and their families to bring about a better understanding and how to advocate.
NAMISA is still in operation today and continues to provide no-cost mental health advocacy, education, and support to those affected by mental illness in southern Arizona.